She told me to leave my own home, the one I built with my hands, paid for with my life. My own son stood beside her, silent. That day, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I began quietly taking back everything they thought they could erase. The words did not just hang in the air, they cut it in half. Maybe you should stay somewhere else for a while. Elise Penrose was leaning against my kitchen counter when she said it, cigarette poised between two fingers, like it was a part of her hand. The morning light should have made her look softer, but instead it caught the curl of smoke and turned it into something sharp, like a blade, drifting between us. I could smell it before I saw its stale tobacco, threading through the room, clinging to my curtains, my clothes, my breath. The kettle on the stove hissed steadily, steam curling out in slow, angry bursts. Above the sink, the overhead light flickered, the same bulb I had been meaning to replace for a week now. Flicker, glow, flicker, glow like it, too, was undecided about whether to stay or leave. I was standing by that sink, my hands resting on the edge. The stainless steel was cold beneath my palms. I remember thinking how strange it was to feel the metal that way after all. I had stood in this exact spot thousands of times, my fingers warm from scrubbing baby bottles when Marcus was an infant. Back then, this sink was a place of comfort, of routine, warm milk smell in the air, Robert's voice in the background, telling me to sit down for once. Now it felt like a witness to something I could not take back. I turned slowly, not because I was calm, but because I needed the time. Needed the seconds to stop my face from showing everything I felt. Elise was watching me, her eyes steady, her mouth set. She did not look away when Marcus came in. He entered, like he had walked into the middle of an argument he wanted no part of, except that he already had taken a side. His side. Her side. Not mine. "Mom," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. His voice was quieter than hers, but it had that tone, the tone you use with someone you think is being unreasonable. We need to keep things peaceful, okay? Elise feels unwelcome." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. Unwelcome? In my house? The one Robert and I bought when Marcus was 2? When the roof leaked and the garden was nothing but weeds? The one I kept standing after Robert died, painting the siding myself, replacing gutters in the rain? She lit a cigarette in the living room, I said evenly, almost politely. Marcus sighed. "It's just one cigarette. You're making it a bigger deal than it needs to be." He glanced at Elise, then back at me. "You're creating tension, Mom. You need to be a little more flexible." Flexible. As though my rules, my years of work, my memories were something elastic, meant to be bent until they snapped. The kettle whistled then, sharp and shrill, as though it had finally had enough of the quiet, too. I turned back to the sink, lifted it off the heat. Behind me, neither of them spoke. The light above flickered again, and I wondered if I should just let it burn out. If you stood on Maple Street in Cedar Falls the year we bought this place, you would have thought we were out of our minds. The house sat at the edge of the road, like it was trying to sink into the ground. One shutter hung loose, swaying every time the wind crossed the yard. The roof sagged in the middle, a slow collapse in progress. The paint peeled in long curling strips, revealing the gray wood beneath. A for sale sign leaned at an angle, as though it had given up standing straight. Robert Robb was grinning when he saw it. He said it had bones. I said it had termites. We met halfway and made an offer the next day. The neighbors, polite as they were, couldn't hide their surprise. "It'll eat up your savings," they warned. "You'll never fix all that needs fixing." We did not listen. In those days, I still had my art classes in the evenings, charcoal sketches, watercolor mornings. I gave them up when the first winter arrived and the heating system failed. I started working double shifts at the diner instead. The morning smelled of coffee and fried bacon. The night smelled of bleach and tiredness. Rob picked up extra shifts at the hardware store, learning carpentry from manuals he brought home in brown paper bags. We saved in envelopes, each labeled roof, insulation, kitchen. It took us a year to stop the leaks, another to strip the walls of lead paint, and 3 more before the garden began to look like something worth walking through. But every nail we hammered, every board we replaced, felt like we were writing our names into the very bones of the house. Then Rob died. It was 15 years ago now, a spring afternoon when the lilacs were blooming. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked coats. One moment he was there, warm and steady. The next I was walking out into the parking lot alone. I came home to the house, and for the first time, it felt too large. Every room echoed, but I couldn't leave. This was where our life had been built board by board, where Marcus had taken his first steps, where the dining table still bore the small dent from the time Rob dropped a hammer in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. From that day on, I became the sole steward of these walls. I painted the siding myself, climbed ladders in the July sun to clear the gutters, fixed the fence when the wind tore it down. People said I was stubborn. They were right. This house had my name in it, and I would not let anyone, neighbor, stranger, or now even my own son, make me feel like a guest inside it. Marcus came back to me in the early days of autumn, a cardboard box under each arm and a tired smile on his face. His divorce had been messy, the kind of unraveling that leaves threads hanging everywhere. He stood in the doorway that first evening like a boy returning home from school, and I could not help but open my arms. The weeks that followed felt almost like rewinding time. We ate dinner together at the kitchen table, the same one he'd done homework on years ago. He helped me rake leaves, his sleeves rolled up, hands blistered just like Rob's used to be after a long day of work. We planted chrysanthemums along the garden path, side by side, trading quiet stories. I thought, I have my son back. Then came Elise Penrose. The first time she stepped into my home, she had a bunch of daisies in her hands and a smile wide enough to catch the light. She called me Miss Walker, thanked me for letting her stay a few days. She cooked dinner that night, lemon chicken, roasted carrots, and made a show of asking where I kept the serving platters. I thought, perhaps, she was just eager to be polite. In those early days, she was all charm and easy laughter. She brought flowers twice more, baked muffins, even offered to do the grocery run. Marcus looked lighter around her. I told myself this was a good thing, that a young woman in the house might be a pleasant change, but the shift came quietly, like damp creeping into the corners of a room. One afternoon, I came home from the store to find my living room rearranged, the couch angled toward the window, my old oak coffee table shoved against the far wall, and Rob's recliner, his chair, moved entirely out of the space. Elise looked up from fluffing pillows and said, "It feels more open now, don't you think?" Another morning, I reached for the coffee tin, only to find a new brand in its place. Sleek packaging, a bitter smell. "This one's better," Elise said, pouring herself a cup. "Yours was a bit too strong." Even the way I folded towels came under her gaze. "If you roll them instead, they take up less space," she explained, her hands moving over my laundry as though it were a training exercise. When I mentioned it to Marcus later, gently, carefully, he chuckled, not unkindly. "Mom, let her have her way. She likes making things feel fresh." Fresh. That was the word he chose. As though my years of order, the placement of every book and cup, were stale. So I bit my tongue. I let the coffee sit in its sleek tin. I walked past the living room, as if I had never known another arrangement. I refolded towels her way when she could see. It seemed better than outright war, but each small change pressed somewhere deep inside me. A steady hand pushing me toward the edge. I just didn't know yet how far they would go, or how far I would be pushed. It began to show in the smallest ways, like hairline cracks in a wall you've painted over too many times. The first was the dinner party. Marcus had invited a few of his friends over, people I didn't know well, but I thought it might be nice to make them feel welcome. I told him I'd prepare my chicken pot pie, the one he had asked for every birthday until he moved out. But before I could even pull out the flour, Marcus smiled awkwardly and said, "Elise has a better recipe. Why don't you just relax this time? Relax." As if cooking for my guests, his guests, was some sort of unnecessary effort. That evening, I sat in my own dining room, while Elise's version of the dish sat steaming in front of us. Everyone complimented her. Marcus beamed. I smiled politely, my fork heavy in my hand. Then came the garden planning in early spring. I'd taken out the worn leather notebook Robert and I used to sketch out the year's planting. "Tomatoes along the east side," I suggested, picturing the jars of homemade sauce cooling on the counter. Marcus didn't even glance at the page. "Elise doesn't like the mess of canning jars," he said. "We'll do herbs instead." The way he said "we," as though the garden had nothing to do with me, felt like someone quietly drawing a boundary around my own land. I put the notebook away, without another word. The last was during December, the season that always carried Robert's voice and laughter into every corner of the house. I was unpacking the old box of family ornaments. The felt snowman Marcus made in 3rd grade. The glass angel Rob bought at a church fair. I'd hung 3 of them before Marcus came in, glanced at the tree, and cleared his throat. "Elise wants a more modern look this year. Could you take these down?" He didn't wait for my answer, just moved to the box and began setting the ornaments inside. I felt my throat close, but I said nothing. Every time, it was the same. An easy shrug, a few soft words, to smooth it over. Marcus always chose Elise's preference over mine. Not with malice, not with raised voices, but with that casual certainty that her comfort mattered more. So, I began reclaiming what I could, quietly. The sunroom where I returned my books to their shelf. The kitchen shelves, where I moved my blue ceramic mugs back to the front. These were small victories, but they were mine. Each one a reminder that I still existed inside these walls. One afternoon, while clearing space in the garage, I found it, Robert's unfinished birdhouse. The wood was still rough on one side, the paint only half done. I ran my fingers over the edges and felt the familiar steadiness of his work. It was something we had meant to finish together. Now, it would be mine to finish alone. My own quiet rebellion. My own promise that not everything in this house could be changed without me. The farmer's market in Cedar Falls had always been my place for quiet Saturdays. The air there carried the scent of warm bread and fresh basil. The chatter of familiar voices drifting between stalls. That morning, I was weighing a bag of peaches when I heard someone call my name. Mrs. Ellison, small, neat, always with a sun hat, was standing near the honey stand. She smiled warmly as I approached, her eyes glancing past me toward the road where Marcus and Elise were unloading the car. "Oh, Nancy," she said, lowering her voice as though sharing a compliment. "It's so lovely to see the young couple making the house their own." For a second, I didn't understand. The words hit slowly, the way cold water seeps into your bones. My mouth tightened, but I managed a polite nod. "Yes," I said. "Lovely." I carried the peaches home, their skin warm from the sun, but all I could feel was that sentence settling inside me like grit in a wound. That night, the house was unusually still. Marcus and Elise had gone upstairs early. I sat in the kitchen, the clock ticking too loudly, pretending to read. Somewhere above, floorboards creaked. Voices floated down, muffled at first, then sharper as I moved to the bottom of the stairs. "She just can't adapt, Marcus," Elise was saying. Her tone wasn't angry, just certain, as though she were stating an obvious fact. "I know," Marcus replied after a pause. "Maybe living in a nursing home would be better for her." The tile under my feet felt unsteady. My hand gripped the banister, not because I might fall, but because I needed something solid to hold. Assisted living. In their minds, I was no longer the woman who had raised him, kept this house standing through every storm. I was a problem to be managed, moved somewhere else for convenience. This was not about coffee brands or furniture arrangements anymore. This was about erasing me from my home, from my own life. I stood there for a moment longer, the shadows of the stairwell wrapping around me. Their voices moved on to something else, softer now, maybe about groceries or weekend plans. I turned back toward the kitchen, my steps slow, deliberate. On the counter, the unfinished birdhouse sat where I'd left it, a smear of red paint still across one side. I touched it lightly, feeling the grain beneath my fingers. This was what Rob and I had built, not just the birdhouse, but every inch of this home. That night I didn't sleep. I lay awake, the ceiling faintly lit by the street lamp outside, and I made a decision. If they were already planning my exit, I would make sure they couldn't force it. I would protect this house the way I had from the beginning, fiercely, quietly, and on my terms. By dawn, I knew exactly who I needed to call. By mid-morning, I had the phone in my hand, the receiver warm against my ear. Clara Whitmore answered on the second ring, her voice calm, unhurried, the way it had been when she handled Robert's will all those years ago. "Clara, it's Nancy Walker," I said. "I need to talk about the house." There was a pause, not surprise, but the kind of stillness that comes from understanding before the details are even shared. "Tell me what's going on," she said. We set an appointment for that afternoon. I drove to her office, a small brick building tucked between the post office and the florist. The sign out front faded by years of Carolina sun. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish. Clara sat across from me at her oak desk, a stack of files at her elbow. "Let's go through everything," she said, sliding a yellow legal pad toward herself. For the next hour, we reviewed every piece of paper tied to my home, the deed, the insurance, the original mortgage documents I'd kept in a fireproof box since 1989. Clara's pen moved steadily, underlining key clauses, circling words. "You own this property outright," she said. "It's in your name only. That gives you full control. But we can make it stronger." "Ho." She outlined the steps in her precise voice. Inheritance clauses that would bypass any automatic transfer to Marcus without my written approval. Power of attorney safeguards, so no decisions could be made without my signature. And a stipulation filed with the county that no changes, legal, structural, or financial, could be made without my explicit consent. As she spoke, I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but the steady weight of ground beneath my feet. By the time I left, the papers were in motion. Clara would draft the amendments. I would sign them. The law would stand between me and anyone who thought I could be pushed aside. Back home, the house was quiet. Marcus and Elise had gone out. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen counter where the unfinished birdhouse sat waiting. I gathered the brushes from the drawer, the old jar of paint I'd kept in the basement. The color was deep red, not the muted shades Robert used to choose, but bright enough to catch the eye from the far end of the yard. I dipped the brush and pulled it across the rough wood. Slow strokes. Deliberate. Clara's words replayed in my head with each sweep. Full control. Your consent. Your decision. The smell of paint filled the room. I turned the birdhouse carefully, covering every bare patch until no raw wood showed. When I set the brush down, my hands were steady, the red still wet and shining. It wasn't just a coat of paint. It was my line drawn. In color. Bold. Unmissable. And entirely my own. They came back late on a Sunday afternoon, the sound of tires crunching over the gravel snapping the quiet like a twig. I was in the sunroom clipping the dead leaves from my spider plant. The windows open wide enough to let in the cool breath of early evening. When the front door opened, there was a pause. The kind of pause you hear when someone walks into a place they thought they knew, only to find it changed. I heard Elise first. Oh, just that one syllable. Soft. Surprised. The house looked the way it had before she'd moved in. My way. The couch back in its rightful place, facing the fireplace. Rob's recliner restored to the corner, where the afternoon light touched it. The coffee table back in the center, its oak surface gleaming after a good polish. On the shelves, my books stood in neat rows, no glossy lifestyle magazines in sight. Even the mugs in the kitchen had been returned to their familiar blue ceramic faces, lined up like soldiers waiting for orders. Marcus stepped into the sunroom doorway, his eyes scanning the room before they landed on me. You've been busy. I set down the scissors and turned to face him. I have. He shifted his weight, hands in his pockets. Some of Elise's things are in the guest room I finished for him. Safe, clean, not broken, just not in here. Elise appeared behind him, her arms folded, but her face less sharp than usual. You touched my things without asking. I met her chaza, steady. I touched the things that weren't part of this house. This home breathes my rules, or it doesn't breathe for you. Marcus blinked, as though the words took a moment to settle. Elise's lips parted, a retort forming, but she let it go. Instead, she stepped forward, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I didn't grow up with rules, Nancy, not real ones. My mother let me do whatever I wanted, stay out all night, skip school, paint my bedroom walls black, and then pink the next week. It sounds fun until you realize it means no one cares enough to tell you no. For a moment, her voice wavered, and I caught something there. Not manipulation, but an old ache. I can see how that might make you crave control, I said slowly. But craving control in someone else's house is not the same as respecting it. Her eyes flickered, as though she wanted to argue, but instead she nodded once. I thought if I made changes, it would feel more like mine. And that's where you and I will never agree, I replied, because it isn't yours. It's mine. You're welcome to be here, as long as you can live with that. But I won't bend the rules that have kept this house standing for 35 years to accommodate carelessness. Marcus let out a breath, half relief, half resignation. Elise looked away first, her gaze drifting to the window where the last light was catching the red of the birdhouse outside. No one raised their voice. There were no slammed doors, no threats. Just the weight of the truth hanging between us, heavier than any argument could have been. I picked up the scissors again and returned to my plant. Dinner will be ready at 6, I said. If you're here. They both understood it wasn't just about the meal. They told me on a Wednesday evening. Marcus knocked on the kitchen door instead of just walking in, which was my first clue that something was different. Elise stood a step behind him, hands folded, eyes steady but not cold. We've decided to get our own place, Marcus said, his voice even. Closer to town. I didn't ask why. I didn't offer congratulations or pretend surprise. I only nodded once. That sounds right. There was no air of defeat in the room, no triumphant victory either, just a quiet understanding. The kind you reach when there's nothing left to fight about. We all knew this was the only way to keep what was left between us from breaking completely. On moving day, they worked quickly. No shouting, no slammed boxes. Elise carried her own things without asking Marcus to step in, as if to prove she could manage them herself. At one point, she disappeared into the car and returned holding something wrapped in an old bath towel. "I thought you should have this," she said, setting it gently on the counter. I unfolded the towel, and there it was, the birdhouse. Finished. The raw wood now sealed with weatherproofing. A small round perch, fixed beneath the entry hole. The bright red paint I had laid down gleamed, untouched. But the rest of it was smooth, solid, ready to face rain and wind. For a moment, my throat tightened. "You did this?" She glanced at Marcus, then back at me. "We did. Figured it should hang where you wanted it all along." It wasn't an apology. Not in words. But it was something, an admission that they had understood, finally, what this house and its pieces meant to me. The farewell was short. Elise shook my hand. Marcus hugged me. The kind of embrace that says we'll talk again, not we've made peace forever. No promises were made, but neither of us wanted them. Forced peace had never lasted here. When the car pulled away, I didn't watch it disappear. Instead, I carried the birdhouse to the kitchen window, the one that caught the morning light. I stepped out into the yard, the grass damp under my shoes, and hung it on the old hook Rob had put there decades ago for a feeder. It swayed gently in the breeze, red roof catching the sun like a small flare. From where I stood, I could see it perfectly framed by the kitchen glass. I went back inside, brewed my coffee, the strong, bitter kind I liked, and sat at the table. Outside, the birdhouse waited. No birds yet, but it didn't matter. It was ready. I was ready. People think silence means surrender, that if you don't shout, you've given in. But silence, when chosen, can be the loudest thing in the room. Mine was not the silence of someone too afraid to speak. It was the sound of me waiting until I knew the exact moment to draw my line. And now the line was there. Bright as the birdhouse. Impossible to miss. If you've ever had to take back what's yours, your home, your space, your voice, I want to hear your story. Because I've told mine, and I know how much it matters to finally tell yours. When you've lived long enough, you learn that losing a thing doesn't always mean it's taken from you in one loud, obvious moment. More often, it's chipped away a small compromise here, a polite silence there, until you realize you've surrendered more than you meant to. I spent years thinking that keeping the peace meant holding my tongue, adjusting my ways, letting others shift the walls around me. But peace built on erasing yourself isn't peace at all. It's quiet defeat. What I learned is that boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're the frame that keeps you standing when others lean too hard. Reclaiming my space wasn't just about furniture, rules, or even the deed to my home. It was about reminding myself that I still matter, that my voice still counts. And the truth is, you're never too old to take back what's yours. Whether it's your time, your home, or your dignity, you have the right and the responsibility to protect it, not out of spite but out of respect for the life you've built. If my story tells you anything, let it be this. You can draw your line at any age, and you can stand on it without apology. If you've ever had to fight for your space, your voice, or your worth, I'd love to hear your story. Subscribe to the channel, share this video, and let's keep telling the truths that remind us and the world we're still here.